Hey folks, it's Josh Karievsky for episode 39 of the Modern Agile Show. It's very exciting to have David Parker here. He's an Agile coach from Workday, a company that is involved in human capital management. Did I get that right? Excellent. Well, pleasure to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Been enjoying the show a long time.
Yeah, well, we were just talking to each other a couple months ago at the Agile Open event. It's an open space gathering of folks who are interested in lean and agile things, and it's in Berkeley, California. So it's a conference that I can actually bike to.
Just up the road, yeah.
Yeah, and you gave a wonderful session on agile talent acquisition.
Yeah, it was sort of a fascinating experience getting to be a part of a big company's journey to try and reinvigorate the talent acquisition function.
Yes.
And I learned a ton about, both about that function and how it works in a big company, and also about, applying agile in a novel space.
Yeah, I mean that's what drew me to that session. That I'm always interested in applying lean and agile principles to all kinds of human endeavors. So this is talent acquisition, and as a owner of a business, we hire people. Mm-hmm. I was also interested in what did you do? What problems did you encounter, and how did you solve them? So we're going to tell this story today, and I'm excited to dive into it. Before we get started with that, so you've been coaching for over 10 years.
That's right. I actually had a marketing job, and I got laid off, and a friend of mine said, there's this guy and he teaches this thing called Scrum, and I was like, that sounds weird, I'll go check it out. So I called him up, my friend Mishkin Bertig in Toronto, Scrum trainer, has been teaching a long time, and he said the best way to understand Scrum is to just come and take my class. And so I sat through the class, and I remember my two impressions coming away was, coming from a marketing background, I was like, there's no way this can work. Like, I don't understand how you can sell this. But if it did work, this would revolutionize work, particularly in the marketing space, where we thrive on making big, grandiose plans, and as a marketer, getting them swept out from under you because of a change in the market reality.
Right.
Which is something in the agile space we really understand.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
How to adapt to that.
Yes. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so, and then I know you were heavily influenced by this book by Mary and Tom Poppendike, Lean Software Development.
Yeah. Their work, has been really formative for the way I think about things. Also, some other, key agile books like Alistair Coburn's books and Jim Highsmith. And
yes.
I think because I worked with Mishkin, I didn't just drink the Scrum Kool-Aid. He was more like, you need to understand where Agile comes from, understand the background and why things are the way they are. Yes, we sell trainings that are very popular in the Scrum space, but there's so much more to Agile.
Right. Good for him. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, so you're influenced by lots of different thinkers. Yeah, that's great. So why don't we talk about agile talent acquisition?
Sure.
I know you worked at a very large, well-known company when you did this. We're not going to name that company, but that was where it was happening, right?
That's right. Big, large company in the talent acquisition. If you think about talent in an organization, it falls kind of underneath the HR banner, right? And talent has an acquisition function, which is recruiting and bringing talent into your organization. Then there's talent onboarding and helping people get situated into their job. And then there's also the talent retention and helping them to develop skills, which is learning and development.
Sure.
So what I was focused on was in the talent acquisition area, and that part of the organization has got 2,500 people globally. It's a huge, organization. And so
just involved in recruiting people. Finding great talent.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So this is a ginormous organization, global organization. So 2,500 people just involved in talent acquisition.
Exactly. And they have different responsibilities related to talent acquisition. There's a pretty linear talent acquisition process. Some people are responsible for example, developing job descriptions and posting job descriptions online and attracting talent. And then there's other people who are responsible for talking to potential candidates and trying to interest them in the company.
Yes.
And there's a sales dimension, right? You're trying to sell candidates on the vision of your company and, and the skills that they'll develop in your organization, who they're going to get to work with, what challenges they're going to solve. And then there's other people who do things like coordinating schedules and getting people into the room together so they can have interviews. And then there's also people who are working behind the scenes who are trying to improve the talent acquisition process just overall. And so I was working with people who are trying to improve talent acquisition process, and they saw the opportunity to try and apply some agile thinking to the talent acquisition process. And so that's where we honed in.
And that's where they asked for your help.
Yeah, they said we need a coach, who can take all this stuff and apply it in this new domain.
Got it. Okay. So what was your first? So obviously it was too slow. The process was too slow. From the point at which someone wanted to hire a person, is that a hiring manager?
A hiring manager. Yeah, a manager who has basically approval to hire. They've got a budget to bring a person into their team. Either they're replacing somebody who's left, or it's in a growth area where they're going to try and get some new skills to develop.
Yes. Something. They need to hire somebody. So they make a request to some group of people saying, hey, find me someone who fits this mold.
That's right.
Fits this description.
So we say there's an engagement model, a model for engaging talent acquisition. And the typical way of, let's say the front door of the linear talent acquisition process is to say, like, I'm hiring manager, I want to go and recruit, want to hire somebody, find me a recruiter, and the recruiter partners with the hiring manager to develop a job description and post an advertisement online. And the typical or the traditional talent acquisition process, one of the phrases that's used in that industry is the post and pray model, where you post the job and then you pray that the right person comes along.
Oh God!
And what's really challenging is, in tech, in software, there's very little unemployment. So there's very few people who are just they're just waiting around for the right job to come along. Most people are employed, and most people. They need to be attracted and brought over. So there's more to the talent acquisition process than just posting and praying that somebody comes along. Right?
Sure.
So they needed some leverage as a way to get into, get in front of candidates and to try and give them their pitch for why they should go to that big company.
Makes sense. So, okay, how did you apply some of these principles of lean or agile to this particular problem? Where did you start?
It's funny, where we started is really not where we ended up. Like, we started, I think, with the philosophy that we were going to apply the most popular Agile framework, which is Scrum, that we were going to apply Scrum to the talent acquisition process.
I see. So you were given that as a kind of mandate?
That was sort of like, that was the challenge.
Go bring Scrum to talent acquisition.
That's right. And one of the things that I've learned is that you can't just drop things willy-nilly from Scrum and have it still be Scrum. Like, the elements of Scrum are there for a reason. Yeah. And so it was very clear from the beginning that we weren't going to just rob Scrum of some of its key rules and then call it Scrum in talent acquisition. So we had to really kind of pull back the layers and say, okay, what we're really looking at is developing a framework for agility. It needs clear values. It needs clear principles. It needs some of the elements. What are the practices and what are the principles that really apply for talent acquisition? Right. And we knew that we were developing a new thing, right? Yeah. So, like, one of our principles was focus. Right. Like, we honed in on talent acquisition professionals need to focus in order to get the job done. Right. But usually what they're doing is each individual recruiter is holding like a quota. They need to meet a quota, or they have a slate of candidates that they need to recruit every quarter, for example. And that reduces their ability to focus because they're constantly trying to juggle many different priorities. I see. So we enabled them to shift towards focusing on the top priority candidates from the perspective of the hiring manager. If they were to list out everybody that they wanted, which is number one, and go after number one instead of go after the easiest roles to fill.
Because you want to get your quota filled. So
Yeah.
if it's a quota, you're like, oh, I've got to get X number of people in the door.
Exactly.
But I don't care if they're the low value people. Like obviously some people are strategic to the organization. Some people play a less strategic role,
That's
an
right.
important role, but maybe less strategic. But from a hiring person or one of these talent acquisition leads, they would just want to hit their own individual quota.
Yeah. If they're
Yeah.
told that they need to hit a certain number, then they're going to focus on what's easiest to fill rather than
Right.
on what's strategic for the company. So we had
Yeah.
to,
So
that
this-
was one of our key things to shift.
So you had to shift from individual accountability for metrics that weren't actually that good for the organization to a group model.
That's right. And it required a partnership between the recruiter and the hiring manager to talk about what were the most strategic, most important roles to fill.
Now, just for a second, a lot of times when there's a metric in place like this, like a quota to fill for an individual, doesn't that affect like their bonus or how they're, so like, did you have to work with people to change that?
We did, yeah. One, luckily the bonus structure was no longer in place, and maybe that was part of the clearing the way for introducing Agile, was to clear things like that that disincentivized people from doing the right job.
Right, because that can often be a real sticking point.
Yeah.
People care about money and they're like, yeah, no, you're not going to change me to Agile if it's going to lower what goes in my wallet.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Another thing that we focused on in terms of the principles of it that would underlie an Agile or lean approach was we looked at the concept of commitment.
Yeah.
Right. So when a hiring manager believes and learns to expect that they're going to get what was committed to them, then they're more likely to just ask for what they need at that moment, rather than this is more just-in-time thinking, right? Because the typical approach to recruiting is the hiring manager basically asks for any possible position for the next, maybe they won't need that position for a year or two.
Oh, I see.
But because it's going to be a really hard skill to obtain, they'll ask for it far in advance.
I see.
Right? But if once there's trust built up that the recruiter will deliver what they've committed to based on an understanding of the marketplace, based on the skills, based on what the salary range is, the recruiter will give that data back to the hiring manager and say, this is what I believe we could fulfill, and then they deliver that, then this trust is built up. So we really underlie this concept of commitment and trust are intertwined.
So as a team, you gathered, so you mentioned 2,500 people earlier. You didn't work with 2,500 people, right?
It was not, I couldn't scale myself to
So is this an area of the larger company or a smaller area of it, or?
We did a couple of things. One of the key approaches was to develop e-learning, and so I put together a lot of training content.
Oh.
And we incentivized people to get the e-learning, by giving them badges and recognizing their accomplishments. And we structured the badges in such a way that you could get a knowledge badge by learning about this agile and lean approach to recruiting. But then beyond that, if they were able to get some experience with it, then they could get the next badge. And if they were able to show some results, they would get the next badge.
Right.
And so we tried to help build it up that way to scale.
Okay.
Another approach we did was communities of practice. So people who were trying to learn these concepts of applying agile and lean principles and practices to the work of recruiting, then they would share ideas with each other.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned as well, when we first talked about this back in October, and you mentioned visualizing the work. That was key. They didn't really have a good sense for what the work was until you actually visualized it from, can you explain a little better?
Well, every talent acquisition professional knows their craft. Like they know the process inside and out. The hiring managers, on the other hand, don't know the process. Right. So what we basically did was we like on a Kanban board, we had columns for exactly each step in the talent acquisition process, and we would show the hiring managers, just have it all laid out. They'd say, okay, step 1 in the process, is developing a job description, right? Step 2 in the process is posting an advertisement for the job online, right? And then the next step in the process is shortlisting a set of candidates. But the hiring manager, because they knew exactly what was next, it brought transparency.
I see.
And so visualizing the workflow really enabled, one, it was it made the conversation very clear between the hiring manager and the talent acquisition professional what they were into, the common endeavor.
Right.
And then the other thing was they could both see where the work was piling up.
Right. You could see the bottlenecks.
You can see the bottlenecks. That's hugely beneficial.
And where were the typical bottlenecks?
Well, this recruiters all know, but this was something that they didn't have the data to explain. Recruiters all know that the bottleneck really is on the hiring manager side. Hiring managers are like, I need you to go and find me someone really, really fast. But then when you visualize the work and you can see the work was piled up at, we're waiting for hiring manager feedback. We're waiting for the hiring manager's availability to do interviews. We're waiting for the hiring manager to get back from their holidays to give us an answer about who do they want to make an offer to.
So now they could see it, and they could see it piling up, and they said, oops, I'm as the hiring manager, I don't want to be the person slowing things down.
That's right. So what they would do is they would, for example, one strategy was the hiring manager would delegate to somebody on their team authority to make hiring decisions.
Sure.
It was sort of an explicit part of the agreement for working in this lean agile model, was to say, okay, if we're going to follow this approach, one, it's going to be very intense. We're going to work in a much more tight-knit way between the hiring manager and the recruiter. And when we get into impediments, when there's things that slow us down, we're going to delegate to, we'll ask you to delegate to somebody else in your organization who can make decisions to move things forward.
Great.
Yeah, so it was simply by visualizing the work and seeing where things piled up, we could say, okay, what are the strategies that we need to break through that bottleneck?
Right, and as a team, they came up with those.
That's right.
Right.
And they dramatically improved the time to delivery. It was cut in half.
It was cut in half.
Yeah.
So if you look at all the averages of how long it took to hire someone, you basically halved it.
Right. I mean, the industry standards, like a gold standard recruiting is somewhere in like the 80 to 100 day range.
From request
to the time somebody is hired, right? So we're talking like 3 months.
Yeah.
And they were able to do it in 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, dramatically different.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Now you mentioned something about parallelization. Like what? So can you say more about that? What was serialized and what became parallelized?
One of the things that I think was made possible by bringing together teams of recruiters was that they could see where the hiring need was and where they were getting receptivity. Let's say you're recruiting for software developer in Austin.
Yeah.
Right. It's a hot market. Lots of the people are even moving to Austin so they can get these software development jobs. Right. So if your hiring manager says that they want to hire a software developer in Austin, then you can go, okay, well, your chances are pretty good, right? So instead of just doing one recruiter's job, hiring one candidate, put together a team that'll source and attract a number of software developers, and each of those recruiters can share candidates. Right. So that was one way that they were able to parallelize the work, is by finding commonalities and in the market where they were trying to attract talent.
So different hiring managers asking for, and if there's a pool of folks who are seeing, oh wait, this person I found is going to fit either one of these opportunities.
That's right.
Then it wouldn't be so,
They're able to connect the dots. Another thing that we did, I could have mentioned when we talked about focus, was having a number of hiring managers contacting a team of recruiters could be kind of unwieldy.
Yes.
So what we did was we said all of those hiring managers should have a focal point in their organization, and we called them the headcount owner. Right. This is the person whose job it is to take all of the requests and to prioritize them into a backlog.
I see.
Right.
So when you said let's say hiring a new vice president, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Versus hiring someone who's like, let's say, very low level entry person job, their first job out of school, whatever. There's a big difference there in terms of what value they bring to the organization.
So we didn't focus this lean agile approach on executive recruiting, particularly because there's like this white glove treatment with executives.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we were able to do was give some level of that white glove treatment to what we call passive candidates. So I mentioned how, like in the workforce, there's very low unemployment. So most people are sitting in, they're in a job already. In order to attract that person, they may be willing to move, but only if the right opportunity came along, and if they were able to have some certainty that we're going to move forward very quickly. So we were able to attract more of this passive talent by giving them, a lot of focused attention, getting them very quickly in front of a hiring manager, being able to give them the details of the job that they would be doing, and to enable them to make a decision to leave their current employment for something hopefully better for them.
I see. So you're really focused, as a team, you all focused on these high value hires.
That was huge.
Yeah, and I think you were saying like they'd hire like on the average 60 people a month or something like that, or?
Depending on, really it depended on the team and the market that they were working in, but we saw a lot of positive signs. That enabling the recruiters to focus by building trust with hiring managers, by being able to deliver a better experience to candidates rather than keeping them waiting on the line for months and months at a time. That those things would all work in the company's advantage.
I see. So lots of subtle and different little areas for improvement, which ultimately led to a 50% reduction in the hiring process. And that's like seeking perfection. In Lean, we talk about ultimately you're seeking perfection. So would you retrospect regularly as a team? Yeah,
one of the things that we did was we changed the length of remember, we were borrowing some Scrum terminology, so we were trying to give the recruiters a fixed time box to focus in. So we said, okay, well, let's focus our hiring project on a 6-week sprint, right? And one of the things we did was we decoupled the retrospective from the end of the sprint, and we said, you need to have retrospectives all the time. Have a daily meeting, but ask yourselves, what are we learning as we're trying to go after these candidates? Bi-weekly, let's see if there's a way that we can improve the process. Retrospectives just became the norm.
An ongoing almost daily,
just the way of doing things.
Multi-times per week, you're retrospecting and learning.
And I'll say, having worked a lot with software developers, the difference I saw in human resources is the comfort with retrospectives.
That's great.
Maybe it's because they work in the people space, but they're much more comfortable with having frequent retrospectives and figuring out ways to improve. It was really cool observation to see.
Now, you also measured Net Promoter Scores?
That's right. We would send surveys to the candidates, to the hiring managers, even to the recruiters, and ask them about their experience. And so we had, world-class Net Promoter Scores. Wow. Yeah. Wow. It was fantastic.
Really neat.
Another big metric that changed was cancellation rates. So what typically happens in a linear recruiting process is that because it takes so long, there's this gap between the time that funding is approved for the role and the time that the person is hired. And by the time the person is hired, it may be another quarter or another half of a year, and they go, well, that funding has dried up.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So what we said was that in order to ensure that the people we're recruiting will be hired, we had to lock in funding from the beginning. So no roles would get pursued if there wasn't funding for them. Right? And so we dropped cancellation rates by 75% just by putting in an explicit policy and then backing it up with actual results.
I see.
So that was another, in Lean we talk about making your policy decisions explicit. Right? And then backing it up with data. And essentially, had we not been able to show results in a much quicker period of time, then the people who controlled the money would have been like, yeah, that's not working for us. But we showed it, and the results came in.
Fantastic. So
it was huge.
The sense of building up trust with the hiring managers and the talent acquisition folks, really, trust was huge. Because now you'd say, I wouldn't have to give you something that I really don't need to hire this person for a year. They'd stop doing that. In other words, they would just give you, I need to hire them in the next X number of months. Let's go to work, right? So they formed that trust so that they no longer had to game the system or mess with the system.
Exactly.
Yeah, wonderful. And is it still gone? When you left, did it continue without you? Yeah.
So, I mean, I think a couple of things happened. When I left, the organization is still committed to to applying lean and agile concepts and
Right.
To the work of recruiting. Part of it really is just the challenge of a big company has to in order to change things at a higher level, it just takes more time.
Yes.
And the things that we did during the course of this project that I was involved in, by creating e-learning, like that needs also time to build up a critical mass of people who have this new understanding.
Yeah.
Right. As a part of upskilling a large workforce.
Wow.
Another thing is, I'm sure you know that when you're following an agile approach, your problems just get kind of you can hone in on your problems. The problems are clearer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, getting a clear sense of what's going on, what's made visible by trying to be more nimble and flexible, graceful in the work, right?
Quick, easy grace in talent acquisition. Right.
Yeah. So in the pursuit of quick, easy grace and talent acquisition, you need more people who understand the vision, who can get behind it, and that's a part of it is about knowledge building and getting a strong sense of how to work together. So I think it'll be ongoing, and I've heard from some of my former colleagues, and they're happy with they're still happy with the work that we've done. And
that's great. Yeah, continued.
It's
It's they realized the value of it, so obviously they want to continue to nourish it and have it help them in the very competitive talent acquisition space.
Oh yeah.
So it's a remarkable story. And roughly, how long did all this take? What this transformation?
They had started their journey about 6 months before I came on, and then I worked on it for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so definitely a couple of years to
and that was just laying the foundation, right? Laying the groundwork for in the human resources is a ripe space for agility and applying these concepts of quick, easy grace.
I love it.
It's a place that needs disruption, but it's also not a place that's really comfortable with change.
Right.
So things are going to build up over time.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your journey about agile talent acquisition. And I know you obviously have a lot more you offer in terms of your lean and agile coaching, but this was a great story to share with our audience. And hey, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Please keep the show going. I love the episodes, and you got like so many great guests. So
well, you're one of them.
To be a part of it, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you enjoyed the show, please share this with others. We are on YouTube. We also take the audio from the shows and put it onto a podcast, so you can find us on the podcast networks you follow. And thanks again for watching.